Here we go. I'm going to start the highlight from right here. This is from right now forward. It'll be uploaded on YouTube. Again, two things we're going over. Talking about raid leaders, decision-making, attitude, and just overall management of a guild or of a raid during farm time compared to progression. We're going to be talking about what to do, what not to do, things that are of benefit, things that aren't of benefit, and then later on we're going to get into the log portion where we're going to be going through, and I show you the more technical side of what we look at more or less during progression and things like that. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to write them down, and then whenever we open it up to questions, we'll get into those. Worst case, if you've got a bounce, just throw them up on my Twitter or something, and I'll get to them within a day or so. All right, so just curious, we'll start out with this. How many people do we have in chat right now? We're up to about 150 in the channel, or 160 now in the channel. I'm sure the number will keep going up as this is going, but how many people in here are raid leaders currently, or have at some point been a raid leader, or see themselves being a raid leader at some point in the future? I'm just curious how many people we're dealing with in chat. Alright, got a couple of people. That's good, actually several. Alright, so that's always a plus that I'm talking directly to people that this will affect, directly. Okay, so yeah, I'll go full screen when we start going through the logs in specific, but for right now, this is just me talking at the beginning, and the raid leader interviews or Q&As or discussions, whatever you really want to look at it like, is it's not really as super rigid, structured, and things like that, but it's still just going to be kind of hopping around, covering some topics to topics, and going from there. All right, so for those of you who don't know, I have been raid leading for going on about 5.5 years out of my 6 years playing, or something like that. Pretty much almost the entire time that I've been playing the game, I've been raid leading. So, this is something that I've been doing for a while, and I'm going to enjoy sharing my knowledge and information with you guys. And one thing I want to make clear up front before we get started today is, by no means am I saying that my methods are the only ones that work, and by no means, by no means am I saying that, you have to follow me exactly. This is just me talking from my experiences and my opinion of things. There are multiple ways to get the job done. There are many different styles of leaderships, all of which can be effective in any given situation. Okay, so before people are like, well, I don't do it that way, blah 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 blah. That's cool. You don't, whatever, man. Do your thing. All right, so that's out of the way. All right, we're gonna look at things. Let's give you guys a situation, right? So here we are. We're coming into a new tier of content. Let's look at it. I'm going to use two different tiers as... Actually, let's just go through this whole X-Pack real quick. I was in Blood Legion during Ice Crown and things like that, and was still more of a member role and things like that going into the content in Cataclysm as just a newly promoted member at the time. So it wasn't really in a raid leader portion, but I'm just going to use this as an example because of what it's going to mean down the road in this discussion. All right, so Ararat, the raid leader at the time, he was dealing with lots of personal stuff, getting a job and things like that, trying to juggle, hardcore raiding and, jobs and other personal stuff going on. And, one thing that's really important as a raid leader is you got to understand that, it might not be fair, but what you have going on is going to directly affect your guild and what it's got, and what it's able to output performance-wise, And like I said, that may not be fair, but that's honestly the truth. If you've got a raid leader who, is always late, you've got a raid leader who is, inconsistent in his performance and things like that, and especially if you're the type of raid leader that's more like, myself, and that's being very strict and, very rigid, discipline, things like that, it really takes a lot out of your stock if you're, not very consistent with that style of play and things like that. So I'm saying that because it's really important to match the style of your leadership and how you're raid leading to, what you're able to bring to the table. If you're someone that's not going to be able to be that super consistent, super, reliable person, and that goes anywhere, anything from performance to attendance to, attitude, whatever. I mean, that's got to match up. All right, so during tier 10, or I'm sorry, tier 11, the entry level or entry tier for Cataclysm for us, during the build up, during the farm time, and this is one of the things that we're going to be comparing is farm time versus progression. During the farm, there wasn't like a clear goal. Okay, so whenever you're doing even your daily activities during farm time, you need to make sure that your guild has a goal. And it doesn't really matter if that's something small or something big or both. You need to make sure that there is no gray area involved. You need to ensure that people understand, short-term goals, long-term goals, and what's needed to accomplish those, tasks. So, or what tasks are needed to accomplish those goals or whatnot. And it's very important, and that's where it comes down on you as a raid leader, is more or less managing the situation. And that goes as far as from just planning to actual during raid attitude and performance. I mean, just because it's farm, you can't really let people be like, oh, well, it's farm, let's just fuck off and do whatever we want to do, So it's not that simple, because if you're constantly in that attitude during the farm, because I mean, let's face it, you're looking at probably two content patches a year on average, sometimes three. Okay, so that's like, sometimes 6 months between content patches, sometimes 3 or 4 months, sometimes a year plus. I mean, it just depends. But the bottom line is, I mean, there is a very, very large gap between content patches, new tiers, new X packs, and things like that. Okay, so you're going to be spending the vast majority of your time during farm. Okay, so that's why it's very important for you to stress the importance of maintaining a disciplined environment while you're doing farm content, because you can't just sit there and let people be doing whatever they want, because whenever you get to progression, like I said yesterday, you can't just flip that switch and expect people to perform where they need to be. Okay, now the one thing that we're going to talk about is how you have to balance that. And the reason I say that you have to balance it is because whenever you're comparing progression to farm, I mean, it's to the point where you could even say to be a little bit more harsh during farm, because when you're in a progression environment, it's not really a good thing to have that, like, attacking people mode, because you're going to be having long raid days. You're going to have to work together as a team. And I'm not saying, stroke people's, penises or anything like that. I mean, you still have to keep order, but I'm saying that you also have to, reality check things. And I know that's one thing that I have to constantly struggle with myself, is just like, okay, it's progression. You got to keep a level head. Don't get super mad at people for making dumb mistakes and things like that, because they're going to happen on new fights. Different players have a different learning curve and things like that. So, when you're on farm, you need to be a little bit, in my opinion, probably a little bit more strict on what's going on. And I'm not saying remove the fun from your raids before people take that out of context. Okay, when you're in there raiding, you're still having fun. But when you guys are pulling a boss, or say your raid night's 4 hours long, okay, you're looking at probably maybe half of that, best case, ballpark figure, whatever, maybe half of that, depending on the instance, is going to be spent fighting bosses. During that half of the raid, people need to be serious, okay? And during the time where you're doing trash or whatever, that's more of a time where you can let people just unwind, talk about whatever TV shows they're watching and things like that. And the reason I say that is because, whenever you start doing a boss fight, people need to be in that mentality. It doesn't matter if it's farm. It doesn't matter if there's a 10% buff on the incident. It doesn't matter if the 30% ICC buff is out. As jokes as it may be, you need to be able to replicate as often as possible the atmosphere as close as you can to what it's going to be like on progression. Because, like I said, you can't just flip that switch. So you need to make sure that you're balancing between being super strict and also letting people enjoy the farm time where it's time to kind of relax. So it's a happy medium. You've got to know your guild, know where to balance the scales on how much, being too heavy, too light, things like that. So, I mean, that's a very, very important part. And, let's transition back to the example I was giving during Tier 11. During, or coming out of Tier 11, the guild kind of took more of a hardcore approach, and that's when Ararat kind of stepped down from the raid leading scene and I stepped in. And, you know, going into Firelands, we had somewhat of a decent game plan, but, you know, it really kind of didn't follow through because, I mean, it was a multitude of reasons, but, you know, part of the reasoning was just due to more of an unclear path that the guild was taking during progression, and that really came up to bite us pretty hard, you know, during Firelands progression. I mean, we were able to go hard for the first few days, and then it kind of fizzed out, but, you know, I mean, that's a whole other can of worms on its own, but that definitely contributed to it, and since that's what we're talking about in today's discussion, you know, that's just something I was going to relate to firsthand. And then you can transition all the way to Dragon Soul, and you see how much more organized and how much more of a goal and, you know, expectations, structure we had outlined for the guild transitioning from, you know, instead of going from tier 11 to tier 12, going from tier 12 to tier 13, it was night and day, man. I mean, we went from having, you know, maybe one alt run going, if that, a week, to having 5 and 6 alt runs going a week. And then we, instead of doing, you know, 2 to 3 normal clears in the first week, we were doing 6, probably could have even done 7 normal clears the first week, 25 man. You know, and the reason for that, you know, I mean, you spread your mains out, getting gear, things like that. You know, I mean, for the mid-range guilds and things like that, it's probably not nearly as important to be doing that many multiple runs. But, you know, if you're looking to build your guild into some serious contender, whether it's for Realm first, whether it's for Region first, whatever, you know, I mean, that's honestly a requirement at this day and age in the game. You know, you can't just get it done with, you know, 30 people on a roster that have one character each, you know. So, I mean, all of that is accomplished during farm time, and that's going, I mean, let's face it, I mean, if you're playing the game in a serious fashion, you're going to be playing to get, you know, the highest ranking you can during progression, and you only get one shot at it. It's not like you can press the reset button. It's not like, okay, we did bad this week, let's do better next week. Every single day of progression is a day that you can't do over. So that's why it's so critical and so important for everyone to understand that the importance of discipline, the importance of structure, the importance of just being organized in all of this. So, you know, hopefully that's making sense to people as far as, like, you know, it's important to be somewhat strict during farm time, and also, you know, take progression. I'll give you an example of what it would mean to be less strict during progression instead of farm, right? So let's look at Spine of Deathwing. I mean, going into that fight, we knew coming from PTR that we did not have, you know, we had really solid boss strats for almost every single boss on PTR up until we got to Spine, okay? You know, we had solid Zanaz strats and positioning. We had solid Yorsaj experience. We had, I mean, Morchok, Kagara. I mean, all that. It was all, we had already, I mean, had solid strats. Obviously, not killing most of them on PTR, but just a good outline of what needed to happen. Okay. Then whenever you find and things like that, it's kind of like you can press the pedal a little bit harder, because there is a lot less of a learning phase than, say, going into a fight where you absolutely know nothing about, okay? And something like that, that's when you need to reality check yourself as a raid leader and be like, look, man, you know, you've got to give people a buffer. You've got to let people, you know, understand that, you know, or you yourself have to understand that there's different people are going to have a different learning curve, okay? And no, I'm not saying it's okay for someone to cause a wipe over the same thing 10 times in a row, okay? I mean, there's a certain limit, and that varies person to person on what's acceptable and what's not. And me personally, like, I mean, I could see myself getting seriously mad at somebody right off the bat if they're just making mistakes due to not listening, okay? But that's a lot different than somebody that, say, just needs to see the fight a few times and it's a problem with just getting the repetitions in. I mean, it's two totally separate things. That's up to the raid leader how they want to deal with it. You know, I mean, one of the biggest things that pisses me off is just people not listening. You know, it's like, you need to be here, you need to be using this then, and then we pull, and then it doesn't happen, and then somebody wasn't listening because they were, you know, over there getting toilet paper off the counter, or, you know, their cat's crawling around their computer and they're just, you know, fascinated with petting it instead of paying attention to a progression raid strat. You know, that's something that is in a different bracket than someone that just needs to see the fight, get pulls in, and things like that. So, you know, The reason I'm saying that is because, I mean, let's get back to spine here. It's like, you're in the fight. People are going to have to see the fight a lot. You just get an overview of what needs to happen. If you understand that it is a very large scale of learning that's going to have to occur between everyone involved, between, the timings of the fight, the DPS requirements of the fight, the comp demands for the fight, all that stuff, right? I mean, you can't be in there just, punching people lights out right off the bat. You've got to be able to go with the flow. You know what I mean? You've got to be able to look at something and be like, that's okay. We just need to change this and it'll be fine. So, I mean, spine was a perfect example of when it was like during progression, it was a lot more of a, okay, guys, stay focused. Let's keep doing this. I mean, almost the very first few hours of pulling that boss, you knew that it was just going to be a marathon. That fight wasn't going to be something that was dead. I mean, you're pulling Zanaz, you're pulling your Saj, you're even, Ultraxion for the most part. You knew it was going to be dying relatively soon. You saw what you needed to see, and you were good. But when you got to spine, it was just like, whoa, man, like, this is going to be a minute, because, I mean, it was very clear right from the get-go on that fight. So, it's a prime example of, balancing, being very aggressive and disciplined during farm, and being a lot more relaxed on progression. So that's the flip side of that. And, there are opposites. Say you have people making mistakes on your size during progression. Just because it's progression, I'm not saying, be, kumbaya, let's hold hands and shit like that. I mean, if people are making mistakes just because they're healing somebody that's at 4 stacks and blowing somebody up on your side's progression, obviously that's like, what the fuck are you doing? Stop making mistakes. You're costing this guild progression right now. Things like that. It's just situationally dependent. The biggest thing that I need everybody to understand is you have to be able to manage the difference between, like, basically balancing being aggressive with being understanding and realistic, okay? So, I mean, that's a very, very important trait that any raid leader can possess. And by no means am I perfect. I mean, I'm sure you could talk to people in my guild and they could tell you, Rig gets mad a lot, whatever. Yes, that's true. Some people, like I said last week in the raid leader interview, it's not everybody's going to see it eye to eye. Not everybody's going to agree with the leadership styles that are made. But the bottom line is, you're the raid leader. There's got to be a raid leader, and as long as that's you, you need to be consistent and stick to what you're doing, okay? And especially when it's proving to work, I mean, eventually when it's proven to work to the point of people being unable to question it, it gets a lot easier, and it just comes with time, man. There's no quick fix for any of that, okay, if that makes any sense at all. So while we're, I guess, wrapping up that portion of the thing with being able to balance the attitude of a raid leader depending on farm or progression content, is there anybody that has questions about that, has situations where they would want advice on or anything like that? So if you guys want to, we'll open that up for chat here for about 8 minutes, take a few Q&As on that, and then we will move on to the log portion of the interview. If nobody's really typing anything, I don't know, there's a delay when I say it and when you guys type. If you guys aren't really got many questions, we'll just move on. Okay, let's see here. Do you yell at them on channel or move them to another channel, like talk on them? I mean, that's just personal preference. I guess it just depends what it is. If it's something that's directly affecting the raid right then, it's not gonna. I'm not gonna pull them out of the channel to avoid their feelings getting hurt. I mean, people need to understand that it's a team game, and if you're one of those little special snowflakes that needs your, I have to pull you in another channel and deal. I mean, that varies per guild. But if you're asking about me personally, I'm not a big fan of taking somebody in a different room and explaining it. I mean, everybody needs to understand that they're equals in the rating, but everybody's held to the same standards. It's yeah. quick answer to your question is most of the time it happens in the channel. Like, what are you doing? Why are you doing that? Fix it, okay? And then good to go. All right, we're good. You know, that's something that you know, that varies depending on the guild and depending on the raid leader. So, I mean, some people do pull people in other channels and things like that. I'm just not a fan of it because it's, I mean, you're just wasting time at that point. And I guess it kind of depends on what it is. If it's something super serious or somebody sends me a tell, it's like, hey, man, can we talk in another channel? I mean, sure. But for the most part, everything's done in the open. Everybody's aware of everything. And, yeah, I mean, it works out pretty well. Your raid leader's DPS is so bad, he consistently says his DPS is really bad because he's too busy raid leading. What shall I say to let him know? Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I guess it doesn't really apply to today's segment, but it applies just because it's raid leader oriented. I don't know, man, like dealing with something like that, I don't really know the guy. You know him obviously a lot better than I do. You know, just tell him you want to talk to him after a raid or something and just be like, hey, man, you know, your DPS is to the point where it's a liability on the guild. And, I mean, as long as that guy understands the priority, you know, totem pole or whatever, and the guild's always, you know, the #1 priority, and then his feelings and his, you know, raid time is underneath that, which everybody should be in that mentality, you know, he's going to have to accept it and either get someone else to raid lead or, yeah, I mean, there's 3 options. He's either going to get better at it, get someone else to raid lead, or, you know, I mean, just sub out and try and do it, teach somebody. I mean, yeah, those are really the main 2. So, yeah, I mean, it pretty much comes down to either one of those. That's on him, though. How do you deal with officer issues versus real-life issues? How do you differentiate them? Do you consider them same? I'm not sure what you mean exactly, Miss Connie, so if you could clarify on that. Do you find that it's easier to raid lead as a tank over another role, such as a healer or DPS? No. To be honest, I mean, me personally, yes, but I mean, there are plenty of people out there that can raid lead just fine on a DPS or can raid lead just fine on the healer. It just depends on the person, and it depends on their, you know, ability to multitask. And I mean, optimally, you just want someone who can raid lead effectively without losing too much of their own personal performance. I don't care who it is, how smart or how good they are. If they're raid leading, they are detracting from their own performance. So, you know, but the good raid leaders are the people that can do it with minimal loss. And the ones that have a substantial loss, like the example that the guy gave before, those are people that kind of need to work on it and kind of, you know, either that or just get someone else to do it, you know. So, yeah. Let's see. How important are having alts for raiding, and what alts do you get players to have? Yes, I mean, you kind of have to look at it one of two. I mean, the approach that we take is healers have other healer alts because healers know healing inside and out, you know. You don't want somebody that usually plays the DPS stepping on the healer alt while they may be able to do it. The bottom line is, whatever someone's main role is, like say me tanking, I have one of every tank class. Like, I understand tanking on an intimate level, you know, positioning, cooldown usage, all that. Like, and a fight just may require a different class, and that's why it's good to have people, you know, it may be boring or bland, but it's definitely the most efficient to have your healers have other healers, your tanks have other tank options, and then, you know, the DPS, they've got a little bit more flexibility, you know. Like a melee could have a ranged alt because the fight might need stacking ranged instead of, you know, things like that. So I think that answers your question, but alts are very important. I mean, like the example I gave you earlier. In today's raiding scene, you're not going to be able to compete by having 25, 30 people on a roster who don't have any alts. It's just not going to happen because... I mean, it's possible, but I mean, you're basically shooting yourself in the foot right before a race because you're giving yourself zero flexibility and just hoping that there's not going to be a fight that has, you know, a very strict comp requirement, i.e. spine, or even a fight where comp just makes the fight extremely easier to get that first kill. You know what I mean? Okay, so let's move on from that. Does it take you long to weed out the selfish people? As in the ones who take things too personal if they get sat for a fight or whatnot. I mean, getting sat is never really something that you're going to have everybody that's like, yeah, man, I'll sit, let's go. That's never really going to happen, all right? I mean, let's be serious. It's not, Blood Legion isn't some utopia of gaming where everybody's got that mentality. Everybody wants to raid. I mean, that's why we keep the guild, that's why we put such a high focus on alts. You're able to keep the guild small, 30 to 33 people on average. That's about our average roster size, which means you've got around 7 subs on average at times, and you've got people that can't get off work that night. I mean, things like that. So you're going to have people that switch sometimes, but the people that are really selfish, that are just going to go throw a fit if you set them, that can't work. And I mean, if you find yourself in a guild like that where you're having to deal with people who throw their weight around because they feel they can, I mean, my advice to you is just make sure that people in the guild understand that there is no one that's not able to be replaced. You just can't have people think that they're irreplaceable or they're above reproach, because whenever someone thinks that they're above reproach, they've got that get out of jail free card where they're just going to be doing whatever they want because they know they can get away with it. People need to understand, like, here are the standards. As long as you're following them, you're good. You step out of line, they get smacked down. It's like, okay, you want to go that role, man, get out of the raid, because at the end of the day, that's what everybody wants to be doing, is raiding. But people also need to understand, like, take Ascendant Council from tier 11 progression. We one tanked the fight. We had our Feral Druid DPS go bear for the other mob because you didn't really need 2 tanks, so the last phase was a 1 tank ordeal. Okay, I was DPS on my DK. DPS really, I mean, honest truth was it just wasn't up to par at the time, and I ended up just having to sit for the fight. I didn't want to sit, but I was like, hey, if what's more important, the guild getting this kill or me having my own personal achievement and satisfaction of being in there? That's just one of those times. It's never easy. You just got to take it like a man and be like, just step back, look at it from a big picture. I need to sit, done deal, and it happens. So that should answer that question. Is it hard to raid lead a 25-man guild progressing through heroics? I mean, it's no different than raid leading any other guild. I mean, to be honest, the raid leading in a higher end guild is honestly, in ways, it's easier than raid leading in like a mid-range guild, because in a mid-range guild, you're always fighting that constant battle for recruitment and things like that. I mean, I've been there, man. I did that for like 2 years. You know what I mean? Like, you're always, climbing, crawling to get every inch you can get, And I mean, ultimately, your guild success is very, very heavily tied into its recruitment process. And as long as you've got good recruitment and you can replace people who are problems, it's not nearly that much of an issue. And that's why it's a little easier in a higher ranked guild than it is in a a mid-range guild and whatnot. Okay. Do you like to run? If so, how far can you run? Yeah, I run a lot in the morning, or in the summer times, early in the morning. So it's getting a little warmer. I'll probably be running a lot more. I'm a 10-man guild, and I'm raid leading together with a main tank on some fights. I do most of it. On other counters, he takes the front seat. What is your experience level on several people raid leading? That's completely fine, man. It doesn't need to be a one-man show. It's not like I'm the raid leader, everybody else's opinion is invalid. That's not really a good attitude to have, And that's not saying that you need 15 people talking at one time. That shit is no-go, man, because, I mean, that's, you don't ever want Mumble just being this constant shit fest of just word vomit being shouted out and people being confused or disoriented or just unable to focus. I mean, even if it's just someone talking outside the norm, there's a certain level of focus that some people have to maintain, even if it's easy content or not. You just you have to limit the amount of shit people are saying. But as long as there's 1 or 2 people calling things out, that's perfectly fine. I mean, you guys, just as long as you have a good working relationship. Do I find myself smart? You sound a little bit selfish. That's a pretty weird question. Do I find myself smart? I know that there are people smarter than me. I don't think that I am the smartest person in the world, if that's what you're getting at. I may sound a little bit selfish to you, but yeah, I don't think that I'm a selfish person at all. It's just a matter of personal opinion. How would you suggest a regular raider deal with a raid leader, guild leader? What the hell? Oh, favoritism. Okay, I just see one word and I know the question that you're asking. How do you deal with favoritism as a raid leader? I mean, quick answer, you just have to keep it as balanced as you can, man. I mean, I would be sitting here lying to you if I told you that there wasn't some factors that actually played into how you're dealing with people. I mean, here's a perfect example. If I've got somebody that's been in the guild for 4 years, has been a constant top performer during progression for 4 years, and I've got somebody that's been in the guild for 4 weeks or 4 months even, you know, you just have to keep it as close together as possible. And like I said, I would be lying to you if I was sitting here being one of those people that's like, everything is equal, everyone is treated equally. I'm a realistic guy. I will tell you the truth pretty much no matter what the situation, all right? Like, there are differences with how people are dealt with. And if you're comparing someone that's 4 years of tenure compared to someone with 4 months of tenure, there's obviously, I mean, you have people that are quick to jump on that as favoritism, but honestly, it's just better labeled as, you know, reality or realism, whatever you want to call it, because you're not going to be able to treat someone that's been in the guild for 4 months the exact same as you would be treating the guy who has been there by your side, the constant, reliable person for 4 years. It's just not going to happen, you know. But that's not saying that you have to be like, okay, that guy can play like shit and he's got a raid spot over this guy. I mean, if we've got an app that comes in and he's doing work, I mean, like, if that guy is just, you know, killing it, man, like, this guy is an all-star in all fashion. I mean, all in every, I mean, you've got to be able to make that call, and it's not easy. And it's like, hey, this guy is doing better than you to a point where you're sitting for him. You're going to hurt people's feelings, but at the end of the day, that's just when you need to tell yourself that, you know, what's best for the guild is priority over what's best for this guy's feelings or what people think about you. You're not a raid leader to be people's friend. You're a raid leader to get the job done, okay? And the job is, depending on your guild, say for us, it's to get as high a ranking as possible in progression. And I'm not going to have somebody, even if they've been in the guild for 3 times the amount of time, that person is not going to keep a raid spot over someone that is going to be a better option for that. Now, again, you just have to balance it with, that's just when experience comes into play, and that's just when, you know, you've got to make sure you're making the right judgment call. You have to be able to, you know, okay, the balance tenure with performance, with consistency, and things like that. And there is no simple answer. It's a gray area. That's just where, you know, like I said, experience, personal judgment, and, you know, standards come into play. Okay. I'm in a new 10-man guild. The GM makes poor judgment calls on a normal basis. How can I explain to him strats, calls during progression need fixing? Just talk to him after a raid, man. Just let him know, hey, this is, just document it, man. And this is, for all the people that are going to ask me questions like, my raid leader does this, blah, 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 what should I do? The biggest thing that I can tell you guys, document it, okay? Just go to Google Docs, open up a spreadsheet, start typing in every one of them, because you don't ever want to go into somewhere and be like, well, yeah, that's happened a lot. You know, what's a lot? You know, is that 10 times? Is that 15 times? Is that 30 times? Document it. Just be, and you don't need to be a dick about it. Like, you need to understand, like, a lot of times when you're dealing with people, it depends on the person, really. If it's somebody that you know that's your friend, I mean, be as real as you need to be. But if you know it's somebody that's going to blow a fuse and, you know, pop a O-ring or whatever, I mean, you just be like, hey, man, I'm not trying to be an asshole about this. This is a problem. I've been kind of keeping track. You know, take a look at this. These are some of the problems that we've had consistently. Is there any way that you think we could work on this? What suggestions could we fix this? I mean, and then you just, the bottom line is, the kicker that you can hit any raid leader with that's hurting the guild is just like, boom, the guild is hurting because of this. We need to change it. You know, word that differently if you need to, but that's the bottom line. They need to understand that the guild is priority, and if it's a raid leader that has the right intentions, it won't be an issue. And if it's not, that's something you're going to have to deal with. If you would answer a question without moving your hands, would you explode? I like moving my hands. All right, that's just how I deal with it. When I'm answering questions, I move my hands a lot. Don't know what to tell you. Okay. I've always been a raid leader. I mean, I've been a raid leader pretty much in any guild that I've been in. Try to get through these questions real quick. I want to go over some of this parse stuff. All right. What is the structure of BL? Is your position just raid leader and as officer as well? How do you deal with two issues? Those are raid leader and those of an officer. I mean, my primary role in the guild is being a raid leader, but that entails a lot. It's not just like, oh, you call out shit during raids. That includes, you know, coming up with game plan for what's going on with what raids, who's in for which, you know, loot spread, alt stuff. I mean, you know, all that stuff. So, yeah. Did I make good money from being in the Army? I'm not sure. I never was in the Army. I was in the Marine Corps, if that's what you mean. And, yeah, no, the money's actually not that good. You're not really in it for the money, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Yeah, the worst thing I find during encounters is when you're charged with calling out specific things like fiery grip or parasite on madness, and other people keep talking over you. You have to talk louder. I mean, talking louder is one case, or just being like, you know, hey, shut the fuck up. I'm trying to call stuff. You guys don't need to be talking over me. All right, good talk. I mean, it's a lot of times, man, it's just, it depends. Some people are able to get it done with, you know, hey, man, can you guys not talk? I'm trying to raid lead. Okay, thanks, you know. Pat on the back, you know, bro hug, whatever. I mean, if that's what you need to do, do it. I mean, the bottom line is just get it done, man. Like, me personally, I would go with the, you know, initial example I gave you, which is just telling people to shut up. Okay. This guy says he just joined. Sorry if it's already been answered. How do you tell people that have been in the guild for a long time that they're A, no longer needed, or B, you want them to leave? I mean, it just depends, man. Like, quickest answer to get to that, like I said, we need to get done with these, is you just need to recruit someone to replace them, and then just start giving that person raid time, and eventually they'll get they'll catch a hint. Or you can just address it right off the bat and pull them in another channel or something. I mean, yeah, and be like, hey, man, you're not, you know, it's your performance isn't where it needs to be, and move on from there. Bottom line is just make it happen, and people's feelings are going to get hurt. Deal with it. That's part of the job. Okay. A couple more questions, and we're going to go into this parse stuff for a minute. Tips on having an effective recruiting process. I don't know. You probably talk to Ataxis on that. He's our special guest this weekend. He's our recruiter, so we can you guys can come and ask him. Okay, let's see. Have I ever benched someone for disrupting raid regardless of performance? Yes, I have, actually. It happens. Like I said, you're not a raid leader to be somebody's friend. You're a raid leader to get the job done. Okay, so kind of wrapped up the balance between being, you know, farm and progression content as being a raid leader. Then we moved into some questions. That's good. One other thing that I wanted to cover today is just showing people how to look at logs and understand